Pro boxing fans here with Shane McGuigan. Shane, I've just been told you're doing the marathon on Sunday and you've got a fight on Saturday at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, man. You're a busy man.
Yeah, but my priority is the fight on Saturday night, and I'll pick up my hobby from about 9 o'clock on Saturday the whole way through to Sunday. So yeah.
Let's talk about this fight for your charge, CBS, Chris Billam-Smith against Brandon Glanton. Look, a lot of people are going to say for Chris, what sort of fight is this? Where does he go if he does beat Brandon Glanton? On record, he's a good level of opposition, but nobody's really heard of him yet in the UK. What would you say to people like that in response to that?
Well, he's very highly ranked. So across the governing body, he's highly ranked, and I think he's got 2 losses. They're both on points. They're both close on points as well, and he's a big puncher. So they want exciting fights, but also we want a relevant fight so that whenever he does win, he gets the chance to potentially fight for a world title afterwards. And I think Brandon Glanton's highly ranked, and even though you guys might not have heard of him, on fight week I've no doubt that you'll be hearing about him because he talks a lot. But that's exactly what Chris also needs someone that's coming in confidence that he can get his teeth stuck into and get up for the fight.
I do want to ask you, obviously last time around it was in Saudi against Gilberto Ramirez. What did Chris learn from that? What did you guys learn from that, being on the stage? You've been on that stage before with the various other fighters, but Chris hadn't been. What did he learn from that?
Well, he learned that there's another level after world level, and that's unification. And he has to step up if he's gonna win a world title again, and he wants to fight for unification. He has to continue to try and improve. And that's he had some success in the fight, but he had the switch offs, and you got a guy that's as skillful and consistent as Ramirez. He was able to capitalize on it, and he won the fight relatively in control. So we've had to. It's a hard one for Chris to take because he boxed ever since that first Tommy McCarthy fight. He stopped him he stopped him in the return, and then he went and beat Chamberlain, and then and it was just one after the other. Great knockout after that against Jurjai. Then he beat Lawrence Coley. Off night against Masnek, but still dug in, turned the script, beat Riakporhe. So even the first fight against Riakporhe, when he lost against Riakporhe, he felt he won it. We all felt he won it, to be honest. He knew he could do a lot better than that, and he did in the return. But that fight there, he's like, okay, I need to address things, and those are the questions that we need answering, because we can do it in a training camp, and he's had a great training camp. But it's about having a bit between the teeth and going going through the process again under the lights and getting a big win, and that's what we're going to get on Saturday. That's what he needs for his confidence to get his head back in the game, in terms of fully believe that he's going to go on and win a world title again.
I do want to move on to the main event, which has had various talking points. First of all, I was watching the Ring Magazine stream yesterday, and Sonny Edwards was talking about the fight, and he said a lot of people are not paying attention to the height difference. A lot of people are paying attention to the weight. For as a trainer, does that come into play? The height difference? I think he's 6 inches taller than Conor. Does that play a difference in this fight for you?
6 inches taller? I don't know. I don't think it's that. He's about what, 5'11", 6 foot maybe. Eubank, 5'11", 6 foot, and Conor's like maybe 5'8", is he? So yeah, I mean, it's there's a little bit of difference there, but Eubank fights they both fight quite short, to be honest. Like Eubank sort of crouches over and Conor rolls underneath. So Eubank throws a great uppercut. Conor rolls his head very well. So it's gonna make for an exciting. I don't see it being a boring fight.
Chris Eubank Sr. has had his say on the fight. He's called it a disgrace. Said a lot of people are going to pocket from this, whilst his son's health comes into play. Do you understand the narrative that he's saying? Do you understand where he's coming from in regards to this?
In the sense of the first one being being because of a ban and a drug test.
That and the weight cut.
Yeah, but the weight cut, I mean, the weight cut is, what he's done in the last 4 fights. I think Eubank Sr. has been involved in camps where he struggled to get down to 160, and he also knows the repercussions of dehydrating your body and starving your body down. You lose the cerebral fluid around your brain, and you can get hemorrhages and nasty things like what Michael Watson and Gerald McClellan got. So I think I understand where he's coming from, because he's seen the dark parts of the sport. And God forbid that none of them come out with any injuries like that. But for Chris Eubank Sr., this is very much like he sees boxing for what it is. He's had the money. He's made millions of pounds out of boxing, and he's had wins and losses and world title fights, and he understands it's the art of boxing, and it's the everlasting effect that a fight can have on your life, not just your career. So he's very passionate, and obviously it comes into play that it's his son as well. So I completely understand where he's coming from, but it's at 160, and there's a £10 rehydration clause that I think might be a good thing for Eubank, because he shouldn't be putting on much more than 12, 13 pounds by the time he gets in that ring. So if he's waking up at 170, 173, maybe 174 at a push, any more then you get sluggish, and he can't be sluggish, because if you're sluggish and one pace and a bit slow against Conor, the naturally smaller, faster man, you're going to come unstuck. So if he's a bit lighter, he's a bit more agile, he's a bit more, he's a bit more nimble, and I think that's something he's going to have on his side.
With Conor, obviously, like you spoke about there, Conor does naturally carry aggression into his fights. He's aggressive outside, but he does carry that aggression into his fight. Do you feel that that's the way that you think that he can beat Chris Eubank Jr. is maybe the aggression outworking him?
He has to, because he's like, look, Billy Joe Saunders beat Eubank, George Groves beat Eubank. They beat him on the jab. They beat him with their feet. And Conor doesn't have that amateur pedigree. He doesn't have that experience. He doesn't have that length to be able to hit you from far away. So all of his fights, he has to win them through pressing and moving his head. If he boxes a small dude at 147, he can maybe get up on his toes for a round, but he does it in spurts, but then he goes back to attacking. I think it's going to favour Eubank Jr. the length of the shots, and I think where he's had to force fights in the past against George and Billy Joe, he's not that good on the front foot. Eubank, he's better on the back foot. So it was suit his style naturally to draw Conor on. But more than the weight, I think it's the age. I think round his neck, he just looks a bit old. He just looks like he's just, he always keeps himself in great shape. I don't think it's ever really been a massive factor of him making weight. It's just like his punch resistance has got older, and his speed and his natural athleticism. He used to be able to rattle off combinations and then move his head and then go again, or move his feet and go again. He's dropped the pace, and why has he dropped the pace? It's either because he's not training at the intensity, which I think is a big factor, but also the fact that he's older, and that sessions are a grind, and he's not able to go through them. He's not able to go through it. You see a lot of middleweights, their best years are in their late 20s, early 30s. You see a lot of heavyweights when they're like 33, 34. They sort of hit their peak later on. You see a lot of featherweights, people like my dad or Nassim Hamed, world champion when they're in the early 20s, mid 20s. So I just think where his weight category is it suits. George Groves retired at 30 years of age. I think it suits that age, and he's 35. So that's the factor, in my opinion.
Just a final one, and I just want to pick your brain because you've been in the industry for such a long time. Chris Eubank Jr. did an interview with Daily Mail's Boxing the other day, and they asked him a question: if you were at the helm of the sport, what would you do with drug cheats? And he said, I would ban them for life, but that'd be more than 50% of the boxers would be gone from boxing. Is boxing that bad in your eyes? Do you feel like that's the case? Because that's a boxer who's fighting at the top or fighting world level fighters is saying that. Do you feel like boxing is going through something that bad?
I mean, I've not had many fighters box people that have failed tests. So, and I've had about 200 fights in the corner. I think Ryan Martin failed a test against Josh Taylor. I think Chudinov didn't fail it against George, but failed it in a fight before. Kevin Lorena failed a test before Daniel Dubois. And yeah, I think there's been a few, but in terms of all of the other fights I've been involved in, so it can't be 50%. I think it's quite rife in America. You know, I think it's a different system out there. I think the UK, the BBC do a fantastic job. But yeah, I think, you know, they should be banned for life, that's for sure.
McGuigan, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much for your time. I'll speak to you next time.